Inside a sprawling palace where laughter once echoed off gilded walls and every toy was within arm's reach, one might imagine a childhood bathed in endless delight. Yet for Prince Harry, those glittering days were marred by a silent ache, a deep, unspoken sorrow that even the finest luxuries couldn't mend. What appears to be the perfect life, with every fancy fulfilled by a devoted retinue, hides an emotional void that has haunted him for years. And as the story unfolds, one can't help but wonder, was there more to that world of sparkle than meets the eye? Harry later confided that his early years in the royal spotlight left him grappling with what he calls generational trauma. It wasn't a lack of wealth or the thrill of exploring grand estates that hurt him, it was the quiet neglect of a tender heart. The wounds ran so deep that in 2020 he chose to abandon the only life he had ever known, determined to raise his own children in an environment filled with warmth and shielded from the relentless glare of the media. Could a different kind of childhood have changed the course of his fate? Not everyone in royal circles agrees with Harry's take on his upbringing. Ingrid Seward, a seasoned observer who has tracked the firm's every twist and turn for 4 decades, believes that the source of Harry's pain lay in his father's gentle leniency. Seward argues, had Charles been firmer with Harry, and, to some extent, William, in their formative years, they might not have caused him so much worry. Even the editor of Majesty magazine has chimed in, labeling Charles as an indulgent father who allowed Harry too much freedom. Is it possible that too much love can sometimes leave scars? In this drama of birthrights and burdens, Harry's status as the spare meant that he was never expected to wear the crown. This extra license, granted by his role as the backup to his elder brother William, wasn't seen as a gift but as a heavy, mocking burden. In his 2023 memoir, he mournfully recalled, "I was the shadow, the support, the plan B. I was brought into the world in case something happened to Willie. I was summoned to provide backup, distraction, diversion and, if necessary, a spare part. Kidney, perhaps. Blood transfusion. Speck of bone marrow." Such words reveal a painful truth. What some might call freedom felt to him like a curse. And yet, could this painful label have shaped his every choice? Seward, in her recent book My Mother and I, dismisses Harry's self-portrayal. She writes that his narrative is more a matter of personal perception, a choice he's made and built a career around. Choosing to be seen as a victim, he has tried to wreak vengeance on his family and the press for all the slights he believes he suffered. And much of his ire has been directed at his elder brother, she notes. For Seward, the seeds of Harry's inner turmoil were sown long ago, in the very moments of his childhood. What if our early years truly set the stage for everything that follows? At 77, Seward has witnessed it all, the fierce battles of public opinion, the highs and lows of royal life, from the War of the Waleses to Tollgate, and the shockwaves of Megxit. She recalls being invited for intimate chats at Kensington Palace or sharing snowy afternoons on Swiss slopes with Charles, William, and Harry. Observing the boys as they grew into men gave her a front-row seat to the unfolding of a troubled upbringing. Can one truly understand the past without being there when it happened? One touching memory Seward recounts is how Princess Diana affectionately called Harry her little baby for so long, while he stubbornly resisted sharing his mother's love with his elder brother, William, who was just 2 years older. Perhaps driven by a desperate need for attention, Harry always felt compelled to compete with William, a battle made even tougher when his brother shone at school. The contrast was stark. Where William thrived academically, Harry was left feeling inadequate. Isn't it ironic how the quest for love can sometimes spark the fiercest rivalry? Diana worried that people might label her younger son as thick simply because he lacked a hunger for learning and never settled with a book. Even though he attended Eton, the pinnacle of education for royals, he struggled with exams and schoolwork, with his housemaster even remarking that he wasn't cut out for university. In Spare, Harry admitted that after his mother's death, he didn't want to fix his poor memory because, for him, memory meant reliving grief. Meanwhile, Prince William's academic journey was a success story. Could these early lessons have set them on such divergent paths? So challenging was the learning curve for Harry that Diana's friend and alternative healer Simone Simmons was brought in, not only to ease his headaches but also to help him cope with dyslexia. This tender effort highlights the stark differences in their upbringings, where even the royal court had to call in outside help. What does it say about a child when simple learning becomes a battle? Even the late queen wasn't immune to frustration. Seward recalled how she often described Charles and Diana's children as unruly little boys. In one vivid incident at Sandringham, the children climbed onto a grand piano, and a clumsy moment by Harry sent a vase of flowers crashing to the floor, shattering in a shower of petals and glass. Although the nanny was quickly summoned to clean up, the Queen's displeasure was palpable, a reminder that even in leisure, old rules and expectations from a bygone era loomed large. Isn't it curious how small mischiefs can echo through generations? At just 9 years old, Harry boldly told his brother, "You're going to be king, it doesn't matter what I do." To Seward, this declaration was less a sign of resignation and more a self-imposed license to act without restraint. It appears that both Charles and Diana, at times, unwittingly allowed Harry's mischief to flourish. For example, he once showed an early knack for mimicry, playfully imitating others without understanding the respect owed to them, and instead of scolding him, his antics only brought smiles. Yet, as later events would show, a touch more discipline in those early days might have steered him differently. Could a stricter hand have rewritten his story? Perhaps the leniency of Charles and Diana stemmed from their own inner guilt over the stormy marriage they endured. The children were often caught in the crossfire of heated arguments and witnessed Diana's tearful outbursts. While Harry, being 2 years younger, was sometimes whisked away by nannies, the echo of discord still reached him. Seward believes that such turbulent times made it hard for Charles to form a strong bond with his sons. When Diana frequently pulled the kids away on weekends, leaving Charles with little time, his gentle nature, combined with a deep aversion to conflict, meant he rarely stood up to his wife. What impact does a home filled with tension have on a young mind? Many in the royal family quietly blamed Charles for the fractured marriage, suggesting that a firmer hand in the early years might have eased many later troubles. Like both his mother and grandmother, Charles shunned confrontation, preferring to avoid problems rather than solve them. This same reluctance later made it difficult for him to rein in Harry's unruly behavior. Reflecting on the past, Seward claims that Charles probably regrets not setting firmer boundaries with both Harry and William. She even told Fox News. He went on with Diana's freestyle of bringing up children. Diana allowed them to do, more or less, what they wanted, which was very fashionable in those days. You let children just get on with things. I think Charles probably regrets that he wasn't a bit stricter, because it might have given both boys a few more boundaries. Does the past hold a mirror to the present, showing us where things might have turned out differently? Diana's approach to motherhood was anything but traditional. She stepped away from formalities, choosing instead to embrace a hands-on style behind palace walls, planning playful outings and impromptu trips with her sons, always keeping a close eye on their feelings. In contrast, Charles, groomed as a future sovereign, clung to the old, formal ways of raising a prince. His version of affection wasn't about constant hugs, it was in small lessons about nature, reminding Harry that even plants have feelings. But for Harry, this method left him feeling emotionally starved. And so, in a bid to mend what he never received, he now showers his own children with an abundance of love. Isn't it strange how one man's missing warmth becomes another's overflow? The pain of that missing comfort is laid bare in the opening lines of his memoir, where Harry recalls the moment Charles broke the news of Diana's death, a moment marked not by a consoling embrace but by cold distance. Some say that Charles's reluctance to show physical affection might stem from his own troubled bond with his mother, the Queen. After all, Princess Elizabeth only had Charles for a brief time before her duties as Queen separated her from her children. Even though it was common for aristocratic kids to be cared for by nannies, the Queen still only caught fleeting glimpses of her little ones, morning and evening meetings that left little time for tender moments. Could this be the origin of a cycle of emotional distance? When Charles spoke to Jonathan Dimbleby for an authorized biography in 1994, he was openly critical of his own upbringing, lamenting the emotional gaps left by his mother and Prince Philip. Seward later told GB News that the king didn't really grow close to his mother until he reached his 50s. For Harry, this cold start in life explains the emotional chasm he feels even now. On a mental health podcast in May 2021, he remarked on how Charles suffered because of his own upbringing and ended up treating him in much the same way, a cycle of genetic pain. Isn't it astonishing how the past can echo into every corner of our lives? The prince made it clear, I don't think we should be pointing the finger or blaming anybody, but certainly when it comes to parenting, if I've experienced some form of pain or suffering because of the pain or suffering that perhaps my father or my parents had suffered, I'm going to make sure I break that cycle so that I don't pass it on, basically. Determined to defy destiny, Harry resolved to change the narrative for his children, even as his own teenage years were marked by wild rebellion. At just 17, as he admits in Spare, he first dabbled in cocaine, a bold, defiant move that foreshadowed his later reputation as the ultimate royal party boy. What does it take to break a cycle that seems written in the stars? Soon, stories of wild nights, booze-fueled escapades abroad, and legendary evenings at Mayfair Club Mahiki became regular headlines. The youngest son of the king was often seen stumbling out of nightclubs, a vivid picture of mischief splashed across every newspaper front page. And when he married Meghan, everything shifted further. His departure from the royal family, his move to America, and his public barrage of criticism against his family shattered the long-standing silence expected of royals. Is there ever a turning point in a life so steeped in public spectacle? Even now, the chill between Harry and Charles remains palpable. In February, following news of Charles's cancer diagnosis, Harry made a dramatic flight to the UK, but their meeting lasted barely 30 minutes. During his other visits last year in May and September, despite his father's faltering health, no reunion took place. The bond that once held them together now lies fractured, leaving both to reflect in quiet moments on where things went awry. Could those early, unruly days have been the root of it all? In the quiet after the storm, one can almost hear Charles pondering the choices of the past, wondering if different childhood rules might have steered his youngest son toward a gentler path. The echoes of playful mischief, rule-breaking, and missed embraces seem to whisper a single, haunting question: was there a moment when everything could have changed?